Big challenge for a lot of people is the inability to keep borrowing money to deploy capital into the marketplace to become wealthy to begin with. We live in a capitalist country, and if you can't deploy capital, you get stuck. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show's code cracking stuff, folks. We're going to dig into ways to build a bigger and better property portfolio. Big challenge for a lot of people is the inability to keep borrowing money to deploy capital into the marketplace to become wealthy to begin with. We live in a capitalist country, and if you can't deploy capital, you get stuck. And of course, one of the reasons a lot of Australians can't buy as many properties as they could per yesteryear is today in Australia, there are responsible lending guidelines that banks impose for borrowers, and a lot of that is around servicing. How much can we service? Today's show is really about cracking some codes around servicing. We're going to talk about buying some properties in our personal name, inside of super, and also inside a trust to build and map out a awesome property portfolio. So, should be a good show. Welcome back, regulars. You know the drill, don't you? Play the program in double speed. Get your life back. And of course, all of the episodes are done are lessons on real estate if you're new. So feel free to go back and explore how to subdivide a block of land. That may be your cup of tea if building a bigger and better portfolio isn't. But of course, today it's difficult for people to become wealthy, because to become wealthy out of real estate, you need a few properties. And of course, when it comes to the concept of mapping out a plan for real estate to become wealthy out of real estate, you kind of need to set the right sail to begin with. And today I wanted to explore with you some of the ways to set the right sail so you can end up where you want to be. And of course, when we talk about property investment and really success from it, we need to start with the end game in mind. What is your end game? And what is your strategy to get there? If I was to ask you, what is your plan to get to your end game? Do you actually know the answer? And I hope you do. And of course, for a lot of my members, that's what they're doing. They're working out how to get to their end game by setting the right sail. Now, for a lot of people, their end game is $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 passive income in retirement per annum. And of course, if you want that activity to unfold for yourself, if you want that revenue in your retirement, you can't do that from buying just one property. It's not possible. And of course, for a lot of people, that means they need to step outside of their comfort zone and use strategies which are a little bit more advanced. And of course, if you're going to use advanced strategies, you quite often need to build a team of accountants and brokers and planners to help you actually understand what you're doing. I think there's kind of awesome investors out there, people who feel anxious if they own more than sort of 2 or 3 properties, which is fine. And then there's other investors that actually are quite sophisticated and quite financial and quite often want more advanced strategies to build a bigger portfolio, which is also fine. There is no right or wrong. As long as you're doing your best and where you feel comfortable, you be you. But hey, we can build a more sizable portfolio. We just need to map out what we're doing. And this is where the importance of my 7 plans comes into play. you need a capital growth plan. And that's also all driven around buying the right assets. The right assets are really critical to deploying capital. If you've got the right properties producing the right capital growth, it means you can recycle equity and use equity to buy other properties. You need a rental growth plan. Rental growth is key principle to getting your real estates from negative cash flow to neutral cash flow or even to positive cash flow. We'll talk a bit about what that looks like when we buy properties inside a trust. It's a key principle. And one of the reasons of I think that that my portfolio is successful, I've always approached rental growth. Where do I get the strongest rents? Because the rents will allow me to eventually borrow more money. We need a tax minimization plan, how to pay off your income tax in your personal name. If we buy a couple of properties, we'll reduce that. And that also fixes one of the biggest financial challenges a lot of people have in their life is they pay too much income tax. Obviously, you're going to need a finance buying power plan. How do you leverage? How do you get where we need to go in a sensible way using different tools that are at your disposal? And of course, eventually you'll need a debt reduction plan, you'll need a retirement plan, and you'll need a wealth acceleration plan if you're got lazy money sitting around. So there's a lot of plans that need to come together for you to end up in a place where your end game matches what's in your mind. If $300,000 passive income is a thought, well, you actually have to do something about that. And that's where the right team, the right plans, the right strategy, the right time horizon all needs to gel. And again, you're not going to get what you want as an end game by sitting around and thinking about it. You've got to actually go out there and buy some real estate and put the right structures in place to end up financially free. No one's going to be financially free off one property investment. It's the basis of it all. But the challenge is it feels hard to buy more than one or two or three properties because the system's basically pegged against us. What happened in 2017, the Royal Commission basically precluded banks from lending money to individuals and creating a form of irresponsible lending. So banks, through the regulator, were told to stop giving Australians money to actually be property investors, which is kind of strange, but it is what it is. And so banks have a legal obligation to you to make sure that the money they lend to you is reasonable and they're not putting you in an over-leveraged position. So obviously for some Australians who are not financially or have a low financial acumen, that's a good thing because we don't want volatility, other property owners to be volatile with their behavior. But what that did, it meant that for a lot of property investors to build a sizable portfolio, they now need to not borrow or own real estate in their own name so they can still borrow from the bank. So the same bank can lend to a different entity, but that entity is not you. And it kind of allows for a more sophisticated approach for both the lendee and the lender. And that's where we use trust structures. So we'll talk a little bit about that eventually on this podcast. But if you want a passive income in retirement, it may mean you need to use some strategies at your disposal. And of course, those strategies involve teaming up with lenders to buy real estate. It's their money, and really real estate is the game of leverage. The more leverage you can get into the market, the more capital growth you're going to get, the quicker you'll come out of the system, the quicker you'll be financially free. And again, leverage is everything. And if you can't leverage, well, you sort of can build some wealth, but you can't accelerate your wealth, which is one of the challenges today. And of course, for a lot of property investors, they built their property portfolio many moons ago, 20 years ago. They got 10 properties. So they've gone on to hold those properties and do very, very well from it. But I can tell you, properties were a lot less expensive than they are today back then. And it was a lot easier back then. So it is more complicated today to build a larger portfolio, but not impossible. Just got to think outside of the box. And so a lot of people I meet have plenty of equity, but can't service more debt. Really, to use trust strategies, you want to have some equity and you still want to have the ability to service at least one more loan. It's a key principle to getting started in this strategy. And again, when you think about how we borrow money, it's pretty simple and straightforward. You've got some savings or you've got some equity. You might have some equity in your PPR, your home, and you can tap some cash out of your principal place of residence. Let's say you can take a deposit out. You can then go and borrow another amount to add to that deposit. And usually banks will lend you 80% and you put in 20%. And of course, you go buy an investment property in your own name. That's great because that's going to help reduce your taxable income. If you do that a couple of times, you're well and truly eliminating one of the biggest financial stupidities in your life, which is paying too much tax. A lot of property investors pay very little tax, which is one of the benefits for providing housing to the rental market here in Australia. You can lower your personal tax income. But there is a point where it is more advantageous to stop lowering your personal tax and actually change structure and start a trust. So how that would work in a simple explanation is, let's say you had 20% you could borrow from your own home or an investment property. You lend that 20% to the trust, and the trust now buys a property. Obviously, same principle. Loan of 80% in the trust, 20% deposit provided by you in the form of equity or cash. You have to guarantee the loan in the beginning. So you need to be able to service the ability to buy a property inside of a trust using your income. So again, if you run out of income servicing, even starting a trust can become a problem. But if you haven't run out of servicing but you potentially need to buy one more property, a trust is a great way to do it. Now, once the property's in the trust, it's an interesting situation because the goal of you as the investor with the property in the trust is to get the property to a neutral geared point. Now, if you're not familiar with neutral gearing, there's negative gearing, which means you basically are propping up the property with your wage. Neutral gearing is effectively the rent takes care of the cost to run the property, and positive cash flow or positive gearing effectively is the rent pays it, the property pays you more in rent than it costs for you to run the property. So when you have a property in a trust, the key principle is to reach what is deemed the neutral gear point. And obviously, trusts have their own tax returns, and your accountant can actually sign off on the fact that your property is at a neutral point. It doesn't require your personal income to assist its ability to live. And once it's reached that point, the loan inside of the trust doesn't need to be declared against your personal guarantee. You basically can remove your guarantee from the trust. Your personal income is not assessed. So from a servicing point of view, you have now freed yourself up to go again because the property itself is now self-sufficient. So what does that mean for you? Well, it means you can go through the process and set up another trust. And by setting up a new trust, you would basically repeat the process. You would guarantee the new loan inside of the new trust. And so if you can get the right real estate with the right capital growth plan, the right rental growth plan, you can actually put yourself in a position over a period of time to accelerate and buy more real estate. And again, obviously you can lower the debt levels inside of the trust to get to a neutral geared point, or you can increase the rent. So it's quite important the type of property you end up buying inside of the trust actually mirrors your end game. So a lot of people have portfolios which are different to perhaps how people visualize their portfolios. By way of example, people will have a PPR, people will have 2 or 3 investments in their own name, and then 2 or 3 investments inside of a trust. And then even beyond that, 1 or 2 investments inside of superannuation. And you can imagine if you've got sort of 3 properties in your own name, 3 in a trust, and 2 in super, that's 8 properties. Assuming those properties are at a bare ass minimum $500,000 each, that's $4 million worth of real estate. If you've got the right rental growth plan, that's $400,000 in income. That's how people set the sale. They buy real estate using what's at their disposal. But obviously trusts carry with them downside factors. Certainly there's no negative gearing benefits that you can claim against your personal income tax. Losses, for example, inside of a trust can't offset your personal income tax, basically. So you can't reduce your taxable income using a trust, which is kind of one of the biggest downside factors. And also, trusts often do not benefit from land tax thresholds available to individuals. Some states like New South Wales impose surcharges on trusts, and it's not cheap. It can be $12,000 per annum for a trust surcharge. So again, some properties in certain states are better to buy inside of a trust than other states. So you just got to be mindful of that. And obviously, if you wanted to transfer your property into a trust or outside of a trust, again, that's going to mean you're still going to pay transfer duty. So you can't sort of say, well, it's my property, I just want it back in my own name. But trusts have some other advantages like asset protection, and obviously they allow you income distribution flexibility. In other words, you can actually play the tax system by also, sending money to other family members through a trust structure. So you can help other people with their world as well. Obviously, you need to get some advice around all this kind of stuff. This is just laying out a bit of a framework so you can find the right team to even help you do that. But that's how it's done. Getting education, building a team, using intellectual property and joint venturing by actually using a finance buyer power plan, joint venturing with banks. Banks want to do this, by the way, because they can't do it the traditional way, which is in your personal name because of regulatory impositions. Obviously, banks are in the business of lending money, and if they can do that using other structures, which are more sophisticated, they're going to do it. I just bought an investment up on the Gold Coast, a commercial property using a trust. It was pretty simple. But hey, it's not for everyone, and some of this stuff makes people very anxious, so I get it. But if you feel like you want to use tools at your distribution, this is a good methodology for you. All right, folks, thanks. That's it from me. I'll talk more real estate soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. To never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app or on YouTube. I would love it if you could give the show a rating and share it with your friends and family. In between episodes, you can always keep in touch with me by connecting on social media over Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Until we meet again on the next episode of the Urban Property Investor, take care and bye for now.